Right, I'll call the meeting to order in the new theater. So wonderful to be here. I acknowledge that the District of Tofino operates within the territory of the Tla-o-qui-aht First Nation. Yes, Tla-o-qui-aht Notice to attendees that the meeting is being video recorded and will be published on the District of Tofino's channel. Notice to virtual attendees to sign up for public comment question period using the Q&A function in Zoom. To register, participants are required to enter the full name, residential address, and the agenda item they wish to speak to. Through unanimous consent, if there are no objections, I'll move that pursuant to section 15 of the District of Tofino meeting procedure bylaw number 1229/2016 as amended, the January 28th, 2025 regular council meeting be held electronically via Zoom and live broadcast on the District of Tofino's YouTube channel, and that the facility provided for the public to watch and hear the meeting be located at Tla-o-qui-aht Community Theatre, 380 Campbell Street in Tofino, BC. Seeing no objections, motion is carried. Also, through unanimous consent, if there are no objections, I move the January 23, 2025 special council meeting agenda be adopted. Seeing no objections, that motion is carried. Moving on to the consent agenda. There are no items that councillors wish to remove. Then, through unanimous consent, I will move that item 4.1 of the consent agenda on the special council meeting held January 23, 2025 be approved and received. No objections, that motion is carried. Ms. Pepsha, do we have anybody signed up for comment period?
Thank you, Mayor Law. I will now make an open call for comments to both members of the public present in the gallery and those participating online. For those in the gallery who wish to speak, please raise your hand. If there is anyone attending online via Zoom that would like to make a comment, you can do so now using the Q&A function. Before making a comment, you will need to state your name, your address, and the agenda item you were speaking to. I will now do a call calling once, calling twice, calling 3 times. No one signed up for comments, Mayor.
Super. No, I don't have a mayor's report, but before we get into reports and presentations, I do want to welcome everybody to this new space. Thank the Tla-o-qui-aht Community Theatre Association for all their hard work, and all the community members and organizations who made this place happen so that we could be here. It's wonderful, and also welcome everybody back from holidays. Moving on to item 6, we have interim housing needs report 2024. Mr. Later.
Thank you. Good morning, Mayor and Council. As you know, this is kind of a second kick at the can here at the interim housing needs report. It's a bit of a revised version. First version was presented to Council during the December 16th committee of the whole meeting, which included some additional analyses beyond the mandated provincial requirements that included projections on unit size and tenure based on market and population needs. This revised version removes those pieces and focuses solely on housing unit projections required by the province. So as you've seen these numbers before, I'm going to keep the presentation pretty brief. But nonetheless, a bit of a recap on the background. So since 2019, the province has required local governments to complete housing needs reports in line with certain content requirements. And as you know, the district adopted its most recent housing needs report in 2021, in line with those 2019 requirements. But in fall of 2023, the province amended the LGA to update content requirements for housing needs reports. And the main change was the adoption of a standardized housing projection method, which is referred to as the H&R method, that all municipalities are required to use, and it relies on primarily Stats Canada data, but also BC data for population. The fall legislation also required local governments to complete an interim housing needs report by January 1st, 2025. That included 3 components. The first was housing demand projections for both 5 and 20-year time horizons based on the new H&R method. A statement on the need for housing in close proximity to active and alternative forms of transportation. And finally, a description of the actions taken by the district since the last H&R in 2021 to address housing needs. Local governments are required to ensure they have appropriate zoning in place to accommodate these projections. And this will be a requirement to be completed by the end of this year. So you've seen the slides again before, but this slide shows the unit projections for 5 and 20 years using 2021 as the base year, using the province's new projection methodology. As you can see, for the 5-year projection, there's 248 total units needed. And for the 20-year, there's 826 units needed. As you can see, this methodology required the consideration of 6 specific components of current and anticipated housing needs. And the results of all of these components added together reflect the total number of units required. So components A, B, C, and E taken together reflect the total number of units required to meet housing needs of existing residents. And components D and F together represent the anticipated growth above and beyond the existing population. So considerations and next steps. One of the main things that I wanted to sort of communicate is these numbers are based on a model projection and is a best guess. It is a standardized methodology that relies on Stats Canada data as well as BC data. And there is possibility that this particular method overestimates demand, especially for smaller communities. But the intent is to use the projections as a general guide and not a specific target to achieve. And these numbers will be updated every 5 years to give us a new understanding of new housing needs. But I think on a broader scale, there is value in understanding trends over time, over 5 years. So next steps moving forward. We are mandated by the province to post the report publicly, and that will be done on our website. We will also be required to review and update our OCP and our zoning bylaw to ensure that our zones have the capacity to accommodate the new units if the demand plays out. We will also be required to complete a full housing needs report by 2028, and then, as mentioned, update this report every 5 years. So with that, here's the recommendation that the district accept the interim housing needs report as information, and happy to take any comments or questions.
Excellent, Mr. Laird. Thank you. Questions for, okay, we'll start at that end of the table and work this way.
Well, first of all, comment, having done a bit of research since the first presentation, I feel a lot more comfortable with signing off on this. When you talk about posting the report, can we put some of those considerations down there as well, just so that the public is aware of some of the issues? Because I've seen some press reports from other communities where they've just said, "Oh, we need 1,000 places." Everybody's going up in arms about this. So,
yeah,
I mean, I'm not saying people pay any attention, but at least it's there.
I think in order to, the obligation that we are required to meet from the province is to post the report. I think there's nothing stopping us from, providing some additional context on our website. So perhaps that's something.
My question is around, we've had previous housing needs studies, and I'm just wondering how the interplay of this one will affect that, or does it supersede it, or they just kind of all taken into consideration?
Yeah, that's right. Thank you for the question. The intent of this new housing needs report and each subsequent one in the future is intended to supersede the previous one completed in 2021. They're really the 2021 housing needs report was based on old numbers and a different methodology. So essentially, it's kind of obsolete at this point. This new housing needs report, as mentioned, was created using a new standardized methodology that is mandated and adopted by all municipalities across the province. This new methodology, my understanding is the main difference between this methodology and the methodology that was used in our previous 2021 report is that this one sort of includes more of a focus on future needs from a buffer perspective. So how many additional units are required above and beyond the needs of the current population in order to achieve a quote unquote healthy market. So there, suffice it to say that there are additional sort of projection components in this current methodology compared to the one that was created for the 2021.
I have other questions too, but I'll let everyone.
Sure, we'll put Councillor Steer in the middle. Councillor Steer, and then we'll go down the table.
Thank you, and through the chair. Thank you for the report. And I think Councillor McMaster and Councillor Anderson, there was a couple of questions. I have I don't call it a silly question, but on the 5-year projections, it's roughly 248, and that's roughly 50 units a year. And I'm just curious, and I know there's a number of categories in each of those potential housing units. I'm just curious, is there a number that's associated with how many humans would actually occupy those units? If I was to think just as 2 people, into a unit, that's 100 people a year. And I'm just curious, is that something that's part of the calculations when we look at housing units in general?
Could you sort of reiterate your question?
Yeah, thanks, Alex. And maybe I wasn't so clear. When we look at the projections for the 5-year, and it was 248, roughly 50 units a year. Yep. Each one of those units is a typical, as a type of housing unit. Is there a number of humans that occupy those? Is there a number that we put for each of those units that a human will be living in? So is it 1 human that's going to be in those units, 2, 3, 4? I'm just curious as to it's a population number that I'm kind of looking at to fit into those housing units. Is that a little better?
Yeah, thank you for the question, Councillor Steer. I think to accurately answer your question, I think it's beyond my understanding of the model, to be honest. But generally speaking, my understanding is that on average, we sort of understand that there's about 2.4 people per dwelling unit. I think maybe I'll just leave it there. I don't exactly want to sort of speculate on how that relates to the model here.
Yeah, thank you. That's exactly what I wanted to hear.
Sure, super. Councillor Sloman?
I don't have any questions. Thank you. My question was very similar to Councillor Steer's.
Okay, and we'll go back to Councillor Anderson and then Councillor Duncan.
My other question was about the OCP and the zoning bylaw updates that are required. I'm thinking about how this plays out with limits to growth and those kind of goals that will there be other things factored into these raw numbers as we adapt the OCP to the zoning bylaw to these numbers?
Yeah, thank you for the question, Councillor Anderson. I think that's a really important question. Until we actually embark on that process to do a review of our OCP and zoning bylaw, I'm not exactly sure how that'll play out. I think I anticipate we'll have to seek clarity on a number of things from the province as we move through that process. But generally speaking, we're going to undertake a review, right? It's a review to understand whether our current zoning permissions could enable these projections to play out. My sense is currently, perhaps, it's not the case right now. We may need to make some zoning adjustments to accommodate these projections. But I think the important thing to communicate is that all the province really cares about is that we have the zoning in place. Yes, that may require us to do some pre-zoning. But the province doesn't care if we hit those building targets. So you ask how this interacts potentially with the limits of growth. And this is, speculation a little bit, but we still have the ability to refuse building permits in line with our limits of growth policy and our existing water supply limitations. So if there's an instance where I guess what I'm trying to say is the province will not hold us to these numbers if we deny a certain number of building permits that would allow us to achieve the projections. They just want to make sure that we have the zoning in place to allow it.
I think we've done a pretty good job in planning, anticipating this policy.
Yeah, I think maybe the last comment I'll say is I think our OCP right now is really well positioned to facilitate additional growth to meet future housing needs. It's a matter of whether zoning reflects that. And I think we're already sort of planning on doing a comprehensive zoning review, shortly into the future. And that will cover a lot of the same or similar questions to those that will be considered under this review by me that's required by the province. So.
Okay.
Just to comment more for council than anybody else, I say I'm comfortable signing off on this, but I'd just like to point out that relating housing needs to population can be tenuous at best. For instance, if you have a couple and they have a child, the population goes up, but the housing needs are still the same. 18 years later, that child wants to move out, but the population is the same, but the housing needs have gone up. So I think this is what this is trying to do, trying to relate this to population. They've got to do something, but there's so many other factors that come into play. So having said that, I'll move the recommendation.
Please do. Yeah, please do.
I move that the District of Tofino Interim Housing Needs Report attached as Appendix 1 to the staff report titled Interim Housing Needs Report 2024, dated January 23, 2025, be received for information.
Bowman, any further comments from council? None, all in favor? Not opposed, motion carried. Thank you, Mr. Laird.
Appreciate it.
Then we are right on to item 6.2, which is our draft financial plan. Let's review.
Good morning, Mayor and Council. Today, we are going to have a look at the 2025 to 2029 draft financial plan for District of Tofino. Throughout the presentation, please feel free to ask questions or to add comments at any point. As a quick overview of what is ahead of us today, this morning, we'll go over a few updates since the last special budget meeting, which was on November 7th, 2024. That will be followed by a financial plan overview. After that, we will jump into the divisional presentations and discuss operating budgets and any updates on capital projects since the last presentation in November. And we will end up with the next steps in the process.
Mr. Levy, can I just gonna look up to Ms. Paushat. Is there a way that we can get Councillor Steer's image up there so that if he has a question, I can respond?
Yes. Chris, your law. If that's sufficient.
That is sufficient. Does that work for you, Councillor Steer? Good, okay. Thank you.
We do have a few updates when it comes to the dates this spring related to the financial plan. As we can see on the screen, the November 7th meeting happened already. Today is the second special budget meeting. And moving forward, the March 13th will have scheduled the third special budget meeting. That will be followed on April 15th, when we will bring forward the bylaws for the financial plan and the tax rate. And on the May 6th, we will have the adoption. In terms of public engagement, the event that was scheduled on November 19, 2024 was canceled due to poor weather conditions and power outage in that day. And the bomb cyclone and that took out the power for the day. And the event is rescheduled for February 6th between 4 and 6 p.m. at Tla-o-qui-aht Sound Community Theater at this location. Such event it is an opportunity for the community to learn more about the financial plan process, ask any questions, and submit any comments that they might have on the process. Now, I would like to turn our attention to the financial plan overview. The budget package that was provided to the council contains a few documents, the consolidated budget, as well as the draft financial plan, which is the second draft, as well as the project summaries for operating and capital projects, and also the detailed project sheets for such projects. In the adopted financial plan for 2024-2028, which happened last year around this time, the fiscal year 2025 has a 6.63% tax increase on base level taxation. And to mention that the base level taxation is the amount that we charge for services outside of water and sewer, and also does not include the capital and infrastructure levy, and also is not including the debt servicing.
Mr. Levy, sorry, just a quick clarification. You've got 2024 up there. Is this 2024 taxation or 2025?
The base level taxation used at the start of calculating the taxes for 2025 is the 2024 value.
Okay.
And based on the adopted financial plan, the 2025 tax increase that was adopted for 2025 last year is 6.63%, and that is the starting point in looking into if the adopted rates that was decided upon last year for 2025, it's still something that achieves our level of service, and it covers the budget as well.
Super, thank you, thanks for that.
And an important point to make here is that in order to balance the budget for 2025, we might not be able to stick to the 6.63% tax increase, but we are working towards that value as a target. And I will have more information coming up. Also, we will not present any budget balancing options today. That will come into the following meeting. But in a few slides, we will talk about areas that can be accessed to achieve that goal. Again, second draft of financial plan as presented today is not balanced. For 2025, the contingency is set at 180,000. The capital and infrastructure levy has the same value as last year at 1.9. And the debt servicing has a value of 369,000, which has both components of short and long-term debt. And that is the value estimated for 2025. Also to mention here that the assessment values, tax rates, and non-market change are going to change once we will receive the revised assessment roll, which will be received around end of March 2025. That was the general fund. Touching briefly on the water and sewer fund for 2025-2029. We do have forecasted for a 4% rate increase starting January 1st. That being a combination of inflationary increases, but also an increase in costs with maintaining the current utility infrastructure that we have. And going over a few numbers, having a look at the 2025 municipal rates, taxes, we start with the base level municipal taxation for 2024. That value includes the non-market change for that year. As mentioned earlier, applying the 6.63% tax increase that was adopted last year for 2025, that adds 310,000, giving us a value of 4.9 million. To that, we had an estimated non-market change revenue of 60,000. That is, again, an estimated value. And also to point out that non-market change represents the change in value on the assessment roll that was received in December, being called the completed one. So changes that are not market related, an example will be new developments. To that value, we are adding the C&I levy for 2025, as mentioned earlier, at 1.9, and also the debt servicing of 369. That brings us to a total municipal taxes for 2025 as it stands right now at 7.3 million. This is something that I will mention throughout the presentation. The second draft as presented is not balanced. And obviously we are working towards that goal. The value of 4.9 million is the estimated taxation. And doing a quick math, we're looking at $887,000 to balance the budget as per second draft. It is a slightly better than first draft. As a reminder, in November 7th, we showed 947,000 difference to balance. It's about 60,000, and we're working obviously in making a bigger dent in that value and come up with a balanced budget. Speaking of balancing the budget, as I mentioned a few slides before, there are few options that will bring that value down. And to mention them in not a particular order, we'll start with surplus reserve. Those are the reserves that hold values accumulating at the end of each year if all expenses are being covered. We also have cuts to the budget that can translate in eliminating or reducing the scope of some activities and projects. Deferrals, those are represented by projects that can be postponed from one year to the other, which reduce the cost burden for that specific year, 2025 to be more specific. We also have the small community grant that is generally used to minimize the balance. Also, as a bit of a good news, in 2024, we receive a one-time increase of that grant of 130,000. So that value, obviously, it's welcome and will be part of the package that would be as an option to cover the balance. Also, the projected water and sewer revenue, that is something that we're working on refining those values and making them as realistic as possible. So those numbers will come in reviewed and reanalyzed for the next meeting that will be on March 13th. Going over the surplus balances, just to kind of have a look at how they look right now. To point out that the numbers on the screen are unaudited and are subject to change. And more specifically, the transactions line and also the allocations line. So we started 2024 with 1.8 million in it. At this point, we can see transactions of 58,000. That was done last year, was used to offset taxation. The interest earned, that is a known value of 73,000. And the allocations for future projects is 174,000, giving us a 1.7 estimated balance at December 31st, 2024. Taking that and looking into 2025, I'm sorry. At this point, we do not have a certain value for 2025 allocations that will come into the next meeting where the numbers will be more certain. We do have, though, also road storm main projects that is scheduled at 139,000. Also, the allocations for the following 4 years, 2026 to 2029, of 665,000. And we are looking right now at an estimated balance available, again, unaudited as of today, of 947,000. For water and sewer, right now the additions are coming from previous years, are still to be determined. But we do have a 2024 allocation for for water and nothing at this point for sewer fund. So the balance is sitting right now are 217 for water and 740 for sewer. Again, unaudited numbers at this point. And I would like also to have a quick look at the C&I levy surpluses. And I just know that it's a bit of a busy sheet, lots of numbers, and we have that being provided to be read and reviewed. But what I would like to do is bring your attention to the top where we can see the 8 types of C&I levy. And I think that's important. This is known information, but I think it's good to go over it again. So we do have the roads and sidewalks, sewer, water, buildings and structure, equipment, vehicle, parking lots.
It's fine, I'm just.
Huh?
I'll just look at it.
You got it on there. It's just difficult for Mr. Sawyer to see the screen, but that's okay. We'll carry on.
Parks and recreation infrastructure, and each group was designed with, as we can see, a specific purpose and goal in mind. Different values with different project in it, but going on the right hand side, right at the totals, we can see that we ended up 2023 at 9.6, and 2024 is expected, again, unaudited values at 5.9. So a bit of a drop because of the use of those monies, and throughout the following 5 years, we can see an increase to 6.2, then 6.6, 7.6, and then an estimated jump in 2028 to 8.5, and in 2029 to 10.3. Again, those are estimated values. As you can see, there are allocations still to occur, and that will come throughout the year. But I thought it's a good time to bring those numbers and present where we stand as of now with C&I levy surpluses. Also, what we did is having a look at what other municipalities throughout the island and BC are doing right now. Again, the rates are an estimation at their end. They are in a draft mode, indicative only for us, and definitely would change prior to their adoption. But I was able to pull 3 island municipalities that are providing some of the values. We have Campbell River, Cumberland, and Nanaimo. The rates for those 3 are ranging from 2.89 to 8%. The average is 6.24. It's a bit of a range, but obviously each has its own goals and strategies. In terms of RMI municipalities, which are closer to us, I had a chance to pull Revelstoke and Whistler. And that is showing us a range between 7 and 8.25%, for a average of 7.63.
Just a question from me, were those, are those from, present drafts, or were they the adopted drafts, like adopted from last year? Are you pulling those from?
From current work that they are
Current.
doing. Yeah, some are more advanced than others. Obviously, there's nothing adopted right now on the 5 municipalities, but are drafts on the work that they did November to January.
Thank you.
Well, Tofino often compares itself to Lucan. Did you have a chance to pull their draft?
Thank you for the question, Councilor Anderson. Through the chair, we do not have a value from them yet.
Be good to include some regional numbers too.
Okay, I will make sure to include them. And before we move into the divisional presentations, I will pause here to see if council has any other questions or comments.
Councillor Steer, I believe, put your hand up.
Yeah, thank you. And through the chair, and I don't know when the time is to have the conversations, but thank you at this point in time for the presentation. And one of the things that I want to look at and probably ask questions, and I don't know what the right timing is on that, but when you outlaid, we are looking at an imbalance of roughly 887,000. We're working towards that. And you listed a number of potential areas to be looking at, and there were 6 of them there that you had put forward. And I'm just wondering, I didn't see on there, and it's the worst one that we want to talk about, but I didn't see in the potential for making up that balance with a tax increase greater than what has been projected from last year at 6.63%. And I'm wondering, is that not something that we're looking at, or as part of the there was 6 of them there, and I didn't see, and I may have missed, but I did not see the potential for a tax increase. I'm not suggesting it. I'm just.
Thank you for the question, Councillor Steer. Through the chair, yes, it is, and absolutely is one of the options. It was missed on this slide, and I apologize for it. But the short answer will be yes. Is one of the areas that will be available for council for options on balancing the budget.
Councillor, you have another question?
Maybe just a follow-up. Yeah, just a quick follow-up on that is at this time with staff, are you looking, is there any areas where you're specifically looking, or are you just presenting to council now as to the areas? And I'm just wondering what you said this was not in a chronological order of what you're looking at, but do you have a prioritized list of where you're looking?
Through the chair, we will be between now and March 13th. We will have more assured numbers on deferrals, reassignments, small community grants, and also the projected water and sewer revenue. And the big 3, let's say, the surplus reserve cuts to the budget and tax increases. Those will be put in front of council with a few scenarios, few options to be looked at, and for a decision or a change of those options to be made available for council to adopt.
Thank you for the response.
I have a question. It has to do with surplus reserve. What would help me, and if it's possible, is to see something like a 10-year surplus reserve trend. Like, we know that last year there's been a surplus reserve addition of like $130,000, whatever. If that happens every year, or is that a one-off? So my rationale behind that is if we're going to balance budgets with surpluses, in this case, a surplus reserve, then is that something that we know going forward, or is it a one-off? You know, is the reserve go up, and then it goes down to zero? Is this repeatable? Is it reliable and repeatable? And if not, if it is, then perhaps we should, you know, it would help me make that decision. If it isn't a reliable source of, you know, revenue for balancing the budget, then that's something that I need to do too. So we know that this is a one-off, or is it happening every year? That would help me in that one specific scenario.
Thank you, Mayor, for the question. That would depend on how the year goes, how the activities and the expenses are going throughout the year. So to have a short answer, it can happen every year to have a surplus. But that's in my opinion, as a financial officer, that would not be the first choice when it comes down to balancing a budget, as would not be necessarily a reliable source on covering the budgets. It is always a good use to have a surplus, but might be second or third option when it comes down to having a strategy of covering the balance year after year using those funds.
Maybe I can add that, I mean, a surplus can be budget items that came in under budget, or can be budget items that didn't get accomplished too. So kind of depends year to year where that surplus came from.
I'm just looking for a trend.
We can absolutely.
If you don't have to work at it. I just something that I'm interested in. Well, reliable and predictable. Reliable and predictable.
Now I would like to turn our attention to the visual presentations, and I will start with the corporate service division. And we will jump right into some numbers, and what you can see on the screen is the operating budget for the administration, and this is the revenue piece. And we are looking at 2025 to 2029 from left to right on the revenue that is projected for the following 5 years. The first one being administration fees. That represents 10% of water and sewer charges. It's mostly flat for between throughout the years, 2025 to 2029, a very small increase. The same trend is being followed by the next one, other tax revenue, and that is mostly composed of the payment in lieu taxes coming from the government, also the 1% utility tax. Fees and charges, that's an amalgamation of various revenues from managed license to miscellaneous admin charges, co-op equity payout. We do not have a change there. We are expecting that value to stay the same. The lease revenue, it's land lease revenue. District owns lease staff accommodations. as you can see, has a small bump between 2025 and 2026. That is due to district staff accommodation revenue. For interest revenue, that is a projection. That is the biggest estimation of all. We do have a slight drop for 2026, and that is based on the expected interest rates at this point. And from there, we're estimating even a lower value. But again, those rates can change quite dramatically sometimes. And we're focusing right now more on the 2025, and the other years will be obviously reworked and revisited once we're going into the next year financial plan. The grant revenue, that is the small community grant that was mentioned earlier. And staying with the same group of administration operating budgets, we are looking at the expenses. First one and the biggest one of this list is staffing and administration. Those are salaries, benefits, training, travel, advertising, and insurance, supplies, also a portion of audit fees. There is a small increase throughout the 5 years. And the legal fees and consulting, we do have a drop in 2026 versus 2025. That is due to a few consulting activities that will happen only in 2025 as freedom of information consulting, collective bargaining, and the list consultant. All that will happen in 2025 and will not show as an expense in 2026. Elections expense line. That is in 2025 purchasing a voting machine. 2026 is represented by election expenses. For municipal building, again, there is a drop in the expense for 2026. That is due to a flagpole that is planned to be replaced right next to us here in 2025. For informational technology expense line, that is composed of financial software, managing IT service, licenses, hardware, software, and there is a small increase throughout the 5 years. For rental units, the expenses are related to district-owned and leased staff accommodations. There is a drop in 2027, and that is due to the end of short-term debt for Ocean Park properties. Moving to the next group, we are looking.
I just have a question, if that's all right, to the chair. Just understanding the first two lines of staffing, administration, legal fees, and consulting. When we have to outsource, bring a contractor in to help the staff out with something, does that go under staffing, administration, or consulting?
That is go under consulting.
Okay, thank you.
The question as well. I feel like I have too many questions, but I know our operating budgets do take into account inflation. I assume some of the increases are, inflation is wrapped up in that increase. But I noticed on our operating revenues in the previous slide that some of those numbers are fairly static, but it's fees and charges. And I'm just wondering, administration fees do go up. Why do the fees and charges not go up to take into account even inflation?
it's a bit of an odd group of revenue that can either go up or go down. It's somehow difficult to pinpoint on how those revenues will go, because I looked in the previous 3-5 years, and sometimes it's a great year for us and more marriage licenses, and in more revenue. In other cases, it's way lower. And it's one of those groups where it's hard to pinpoint what exactly. Basically, what I'm trying to say, there is not a specific trend for this group of expenses.
Gotcha, makes sense. Thanks. Yeah, I just wondered why, if it was built into those fees, they do, account for inflation, et cetera. Why is it static? But that makes sense to me. Thanks.
And for council operating budget, we added the 2024 adopted budget also here, just to give council a better view of how 2025 and subsequent years compare to it. Starting with the revenue, we can see in 2025 an increase that represents the 2024 and the 2025 community-to-community grants, which is 20,000 each. It was not spent in 2024. It was moved into the 2025 budget. We have a small value under transfer from revenue that is coming from recreation. For expenses, we have the council benefits and indemnities. And it composes it's exactly that, the indemnities and the benefits. There is a steady increase, and that relates to inflation. For initiatives and advocacy, we can see a slight drop in 2025. But that is due to the move of small portion of the Wild BC that was sitting here for 2024 budget, was moved into community services. So the expense still exists. It's just that it's not showing up into this specific budget. Council grants, that is composed by the two groups of council grants and arts and culture grants, 39,000, 40,000 each. And council expenses, we can see in 2025 an increase that is due to community grant expense. And also part of additional costs. An example would be the rental of the theater. For 2026, expenses have been added for the new council, and also the drop that we can see in 2028 is because there is no strat plan expense for that year. Now, radio venues in terms of internal reshuffling, starting January 6, the emergency planning group is part of the corporate services division, and is reporting into the manager of legislative services. Reason for that is decreasing the portfolio for the manager of planning, but also because emergency planning aligns very well with communications and legislative groups, which are both under the corporate services team. In terms of revenue for emergency planning, the 122,000, those are for UBCM grants that we will receive, the transfer from revenue has two pieces to it. The LG cap for 60,000 and 14,000 for RMI, the tsunami signage. In terms of expenses for staffing and administration, there is a slight drop between 2025 and 2026. That is due to one-time training that will happen in 2025 for emergency planning staff, and also one-time purchase of emergency equipment. For emergency planning building, not a lot of change. There is a lot of activity under emergency planning projects. As you can see for 2025, we have 8 to 9 projects for current fiscal year. It will be a busy year, but a productive one for emergency planning. And then we are going back to a more of a normal activity level for 2026 to 2029. And having a quick summary of how emergency planning projects and any differences between now and November 7, when all the projects were brought forward in front of council. I can report that between November 7 and January 23rd, there are no changes for a majority of them. We do have a deferral though, emergency beach markers, which was quoted at $10,000. And in an effort to reduce, even though not a lot, but a bit on the balance for the budgets, the decision was made to defer the project for 2026. We do have though a new project, and that is the installation of 2 safety kiosks at Cox Bay trail entrances. These kiosks will provide critical resources to support timely and effective responses during emergencies. As was proven that Cox Bay stands as a high volume of first responder calls. I will pause here to see if there are any questions on bill for corporate services.
Questions from council? Councillor Steer.
It's more just a quick comment, and it goes back to how we can look at reducing taxation potentially, or balancing the budget, sorry. And it's just a quick comment. Whenever we look at deferring projects and costs, and I know there's a fine balance there, we certainly know that things are not getting cheaper into the future. So I just always like to keep that in the back of the mind, depending on what that project is. When we start deferring, we are into the future going to be looking at increased costs for that. So I know we're looking to find that balance. I just wanted to make that comment.
Mine is just a comment question, follow up on my previous question. Just noting that it's interesting in staffing administration, if we do have staff positions that are unfilled, and then we have to put that out to a contractor, it puts it into a different category in the budget. So just something that I find interesting, given that we, as we're looking at hiring and filling different positions, keeping that in mind for the budget.
All right, seeing no other questions.
Thank you. And now I would like to pass the presentation to Ms. April Province, Director of Human Services.
Thank you. Good morning, Mayor and Council. I'm enjoying being in this space so far. I'll be presenting the Community Services Division. Just to note that I won't be presenting RMI today. Council will have seen existing projects at the previous budget meeting. We were working on a new RDS, Resort Development Strategy for 2025 to 2027, and work is still needed to reconcile 2024 projects in order to determine the available carryover amount for 2025. So the first category I'll present is the Community Children's Center. This remains fairly static here when you see the net from taxation at the bottom. As council is aware, the district has applied for a $10 a day to be a $10 a day center. We are feeling optimistic about that and should know in the coming months. If we are successful, we'll see that net from taxation decrease significantly. Staff will have more information on that if we are successful at the next budget meeting. Recreation, again, fairly static here. We have an amount coming in from grants and contributions, which fluctuates somewhat through the years. The Kids Access Fund. So there was a resolution in 2024 that the Recreation Advisory Committee request that council look at financial solutions to sustain the Kids Access Fund and that be referred to staff. Staff would like to spend a little bit more time with that. So we don't have a recommendation today, but we'll be coming forward with something likely at a COW in the future. Recreation project summary here. Of course, the Recreation Parks Trails strategic plan is underway, began in 2024, carries on until the spring of this year. Multi-purpose room sound baffles. This was presented at the first budget meeting. The cost of this is $12,000. We are looking at this as something that could be pushed forward if we need to help balance the budget. We're also looking at whether there are grant funds available. It's primarily our seniors programming that the seniors have challenges in that space, such as the echoey, even though there are some existing sound baffles in place. Moving on to bylaw services. I'll just highlight the contract and professional fees there. That is largely the RCMP summer reservist position. This amount also includes the full $20,000 that's requested from WildSafe BC. That has been incorporated into this draft of the financial plan as well. And again, that was a council resolution that came forward in late 2024. There was a question at that meeting whether RMI funding could be used to fund all or part of the WildSafe support that is provided. And I did have a conversation with ministry staff. It has been done in other jurisdictions. I believe Whistler uses a portion of RMI funding. It is in their resort development strategy. So potentially in the next draft of the resort development strategy, we could incorporate that. The activities would have to be targeted towards visitors. So whether that's visitor education, handouts, signage, that type of a thing for it to be eligible. So it may fund a portion, but likely not all of that contribution.
Quick question on that one. We're working with short-term rentals and businesses on garbage being under visitor focused.
Yeah, definitely visitor oriented. Moving on to planning services. So due to limited staffing resources and planning right now, some projects have been deferred to 2026. And I'll go into more detail on that on the following slide. The grants and contributions that you see there in 2025 and 2026, that's our Housing Accelerator Fund funding. So no change to these projects here. The HAF project, those are all still as they have been presented in the previous draft. I'll just make a comment here about the mobile population census. So this is work that is in the financial plan to be undertaken every 2 years. It was undertaken in early 2024. And so we worked with TELUS Insights program to obtain essentially cell phone data. So we have this pile of data. It's quite raw and staff have met with the TELUS folks to learn a little bit more about this. So there are some limitations to the data. There's a number of assumptions that TELUS does make when they kind of pull this data, and we've learned there's a lot of extrapolation. So we're looking to further analyze that in 2025, but before doing this again in 2026. We've also learned that TELUS no longer provides that service, but we know that there are other service providers that pull cell phone tower data and analyze it on behalf of various organizations. Deferred, you will see there the dark skies policy and the zoning bylaw rewrite to 2026. And again, that's just due to the realities of our staffing resources at this time. These two are deleted, at least for the time being. This is the OCP reporting, and that was something that we had contracted out at one point, and the integrated community sustainability plan. Moving on to the fire department. Grants and contribution, you'll see that $40,000 amount there is the UBCM grant that Chief McKeough applied for on the district's behalf. We haven't heard about that, whether we're successful or not. We should know that soon. And we are optimistic that that funding will continue to be available through 2026 and 2029, but we have not included that in the financial plan until we have more information there. The fire protection revenue, that is the fire services agreement that was recently renegotiated with Tla-o-qui-aht First Nations for protection of the communities at Tysana and Lifta. In terms of projects in the fire services area, there's no change to the proposed firefighter benefits, firefighter PPE and equipment replacement. Again, that is grant dependent, and the SCBA PAC replacement, that is a previously approved project being funded by CNI levy. And finally, the last slide I'll present is a future fire hall replacement, and also includes the training ground project. Now, this is a very preliminary project sheet. Staff has been working with the Fire Society to determine the scope and possible location of a future fire hall, as we've had a number of studies now that have let us know that our current fire hall is end of life and it does not meet any kind of current seismic standard. This project is, you can't see the whole project sheet here, but I believe it's in your package, over 5 years. So no amount coming from taxation at this time, funded by donations from the Fire Society, as well as grants to be determined. We've started some preliminary work to determine the scope and location, and as more details are known about that, these numbers will be refined. So it's a bit of a placeholder at this time, but want this to definitely be on council's radar. I'm happy to answer any questions.
Questions from council? I see a hand up on the screen, Councillor Steer.
Yes, thank you, and through the chair. Is this the end of the presentation, April? I just have the, or did you have more to go?
I will be passing it off to Mr. Aaron Rogers after this.
Great. So I do have a quick question, a quick comment first. Thank you for that structure there. It's really helpful to see those project summaries, change node, change deferrals, deletions. That was really helpful. Thank you. A quick question, and I missed part of it. The audio is not 100% great. But when we were talking about the Kids Access Fund, you had made some comments around maybe some restructuring or some conversation around that. But just I was looking at the financial plan and its line item 709 column. And in the Kids Access Fund, the transfers from reserves, the Access Fund reserve was roughly $13,000. Well, it was $13,000 each year. But then in 2029, it drops down to $3,029. And I may have missed the explanation for that in your comments, but maybe you could illuminate me on that, please.
Thank you for the question, Councillor Steer. That is how far the existing funding is expected to continue until. So it's not sustainable at this time. Right now, that funding is just comes from donations, things like the Saltwater Classic, Breakfast with Santa, small fundraising activities. So it is not sustainable, and that's been recognized by, of course, by staff and also the Recreation Advisory Committee. And that's why we're taking a look at how we can fund that in perpetuity, because it is a valuable service, and we're seeing more uptake of the program in recent years.
Thank you, April.
There's no further questions. I'll pass it off to Mr. Aaron Rogers, Director of Infrastructure.
Council. Testing. Audio.
Like you doing stand up here.
Next time we'll have to get a little.
Yeah,
Tuck it in a little bit.
I was just thinking about that, how you fit more people in here, like we're gonna have to think about this a little bit.
Good start.
Great start. So I'm gonna be running through our public infrastructure and public works budget for round 2 of the budget cycle. I'm gonna move fairly quickly through here. I'm gonna try to add detail where I can. Similar to Ms. Vermont's and Mr. Andre's presentations, these line items are a bundle of goods, so to speak. There's quite a few line items that go into each of these. And so if we have any questions about, big differences from one year to the next, or I'm happy to dig down and try to answer that. The main thing I want to talk about on this slide was just explain what the user fees and charges were. So those are basic admin fees, miscellaneous revenue, community hall, fund, like revenues, cemetery revenues, months place. So that's basically what user fees and charges are. The water and sewer funds, those are the transfers from our water and sewer funds into our public works. So public works is not funded, by user fees. So we transfer money into those funds to support the work that happens at public works yard and building. And then finally transfer from reserve. That's where the funds come into from our reserve accounts and then go back out through our expenses. So I can speak to the large discrepancy between 25 and 26 in the next slide. So we can see here, I'm going to run through this one probably line by line. So staffing administration, we can see between 26 and 27, a little bit of a significant jump, and also 29, and those are just based on wage increases expected through either exempt contracts or unionized staff changes due to the collective agreement. In the engineering consulting line item, we can see here in 25, we have a fairly large number of 166,000. That's going to help pay for our stormwater master plan and our DTCs and subdivision and development bylaw. Our asset management line item there, you can see it's pretty consistent, and that's basically most of that is the expense of our PSD citywide software, which we use for a lot now. Public works yard line item, you can see it's a bit of a larger number in 25. That's due to some safety upgrades. We did a condition assessment last year, and there's some I think electrical upgrades that are needed, as well as we're going to close off some stairs that are that shouldn't be used. In fleet, again, we can see in 25 a significant amount more than in the following years. That's due to a new vehicle we're going to purchase, as well as some maintenance, some heavy duty maintenance for one of our fleet vehicles. Streets, sidewalks, and drainage. We have some asset management planning and condition assessments in 25. Facilities maintenance, we're looking at in 25, adding some AEDs, roof replacement at the park, the Village Green Park, as well as improvements to drainage, the master plan, and some work at Monk's Place, Monk's Park. And then finally, we see in Parks and Trails, the large amount in 25 is to do with some improvements to Anchor Park for safety reasons. And then in 28, we also see a bit of a jump, and that's to do with some parks at DCC. So maybe we'll just pause there and spat a lot at you. If you have any questions.
From council, open the council for questions. Hearing none, carry on.
Thank you. The Public Works project summary. We see our DCC bylaw updates. Those will continue as we develop master plans and asset management plans. Storm is set up for 26. We're still working on finalizing our water DCC from last year. The Anchor Park upgrades, again, is for safety, and it's to be about $26,000. We'll continue with our LED street light replacement program.
the Olson Road storm mains back on the books and something we're gonna get going on pretty quick here. We still have some conversations with MOT that we need to include in terms of what their funding contribution will be. The fleet additions is to do with the new vehicle for our facility maintenance worker, which we talked about in the previous slide. And our fleet replacements, which I think council will remember from the last meeting, was to do with our multi-hog, and that conversation is still under review. So we have a meeting scheduled for early next week to try to make a final decision on what we're going to do in terms of that. So council can expect to see an update potentially in the next iteration of the budget process. And then the Gibson Street design at this point is still scheduled for 2027, and that involves the design of the road from Gibson Street from First, potentially through to Fourth, but definitely to Third, to try to formalize that process with building, 28, 29 or something like that, depending on funding abilities. Any questions on Public Works?
Councillor yeah, I just said the Gibson Street design budget, when it came across it, seemed really high for what seems to be a fairly small, simple street design. And I believe it came in at 150,000. Is that? Does that seem high to anyone else, or just to me?
It doesn't seem high to me. I think what we tried to budget for in design, and it's just design engineering, all that pre-work, is about 10 or 15% of the value of the project. And so that project's going to be $1 million plus. And so it feels right to me. That's where we would have, that estimate would have come out of some, I believe it's 15% of what the value of the project was. It could come under that, but it might not. And when we talk about design, we're not talking about the urban design. We're talking about engineering design. So how how the engineering all works together. We're paying engineers to design it.
Okay. Sure.
Thanks, and it's also about Gibson Street. So, just for clarity, that engineering design is going to affect the unpaved part of Gibson, currently between First and Second Street.
Definitely that.
That's why it's going to be so high.
Yeah, we're designing a new road. It's like any design work includes 15%. We can't just go and put a road in. We have to have people design it to the standards that we have. It definitely the portion that you just mentioned, but it may also be, we may also take that opportunity depending on, how much funds we may have available to just finish it off to 4th Street so that we don't have, Campbell to, we're still going to have, but Campbell to 4th, one thing, the old section in the middle, and then the new section. We're just trying to improve it as we can. So maybe our best opportunity to take care of that 3rd to 4th portion now, since we've now taken care of all the underground there. So we just put in the new water line this year, and it goes all the way through. So all the underground is done now. The question will be how far we go. That'll come back to council for a decision. Do we have the funds this council's interested in? But won't see it for a couple of years yet.
Thanks. Just follow up. Yeah, I was curious how much of our budget for streets and drainage was, being taken up by just the constant regrading of that section as well. So we could see it finished off.
Yeah, it's a really great point, and that's one of the impetus behind that Mackenzie Beach project was we're spending $20,000 or $30,000 a year in grading. Comes out of a different budget, like the operating budget. We're not spending a lot of money right now on there. We do get in there and try to grade it, every couple of months or after a lot of rain. But yeah, the less we have to do that, the better.
Actually, I had a question. Maybe I was in there, but I missed it, but it just occurred to me. A resident asked me, what about Campbell Street? That was kind of design on, off, on, off. What's the status of Campbell Street?
Maybe I would like to direct that to my colleagues.
Thank you, through the chair. The Campbell Street Phase 3 design, which was for the full 2 blocks from 2nd Street to the western terminus. We had that cost estimate updated in 2023, and it's about $4 million, which is currently unfunded. What we're looking at, and this is one of the projects that may come back to council at the 3rd draft, is with the existing RMI funding that we have, could we do a sort of a light version, which, just sidewalk replacements, maybe even in just that co-op grocery block, because we feel those are in need of replacement as well. But it wouldn't be the full realignment of the road and the full streetscaping and that was originally proposed.
Super, thank you.
Window is lovely.
I'm just gonna stop talking. They're out there.
If I was talking, I was like, oh.
Thanks for a quick meeting.
It's better than.
Questions, what?
Better than the previous one, if, you know, people chanting outside the door. Okay. You have one new project to discuss, the stormwater master plan. We were gonna be working next year on a stormwater master plan as well as a sewer master plan. The stormwater master plan is just becoming more and more important every year as we're dealing with, you know, these more intense storms or more intense months. And, you know, our current system is not a system, it's just, you know, it's either culverts and CSP and ditches. And so we'd like to spend some time and money to get this sorted out. This will also feed into our asset management plan. So what we're proposing is to separate out at some point in the future in our C&I levy. Right now, our storm and our sanitary sewer are in the same C&I levy basket. We want to think about maybe taking those out into their own baskets, so we're funding them separately. And really understanding that. So this is the first step, which is get the plan in place, figure out what we have, where our gaps are. Out of that will come an asset management plan, and then we'll have to come back to council and a conversation about C&I levy and how we're going to be, you know, slowly adjusting that over the coming years. The water fund, not much to speak about in here. We can see in 27 under miscellaneous charges and contributions, there's a larger water audit. So as we go through our conservation plan, there's some years that we have more intense audits and other years that we don't. We can see there in 27 is one of those more intense years. The transfer from general fund line item is for long-term debt, and that was for the Okmos's water reservoir back in 2009. I learned that quite recently. And then just to mention that transfer reserve is just for operating only. This is not capital. So fun things, expenses. The engineering consulting we see is a little bit larger than 25. That's to do with some DCC work. Reservoir, a little bit of difference between 25 and 26. That's to do with an altitude valve install, DL117 reservoir. The water projects line item you can see in 27 to 28. That's again to do with our water audits that I spoke about in that previous slide. And 27, 28, we have a little bit of changes in water lines. That's to do with purchasing some new acoustic water leak equipment and some hydrant work. That one will probably be under review prior to 27, 28, but currently that's what's in the budget. That's it for me for waterfront, so I'm happy to take any questions on this slide. Waterfront project summary. So we are planning on a number of projects next year or this year, 25. The Shark Creek Dam remediation, the Close Creek valve change replacement, and some Main Street water replacements. These would be funded primarily from, I think, all from C&I levy. This year will be a planning year for us. So the idea is to do a bunch of planning all at once, maybe use that to try to get a good price on their engineering services, and then building or installing these items in 2026. The bars, one tank replacement is scheduled for 27, 28. We'll have to look at funding for that next year. Close Creek infiltration gallery renewal is scheduled for 28. Any questions on water projects?
Could I have a point of privilege, request a 5-minute break?
Good to go.
Okay, we're reconvening.
It's a long, it's a 9-minute, 5-minute.
Great, moving on to my last 3 slides. Not much to point out in the operating budget sewer fund. As I said, there's a bunch of projects happening in 25, and that's why you see the large transfer from reserve. The engineering consulting line item, we see 25 is quite large. Again, that's to do with our master plans and our development cost charges bylaw. The wastewater treatment plant, we see some changes sort of moving down from 25 through to 28, and that's to do with some costs related to our ECOP contract for our contracted level 4 sewer operators, as well as some changes year to year on monitoring. So we have to monitor the effluent that comes out of the plant. Some years it's more intense than others, so you'll see a little bit of variation there. Sewer lines, we see a little bit larger in 25 again, and this is to do with some inflow and infiltration contracting that we've got planned to try to, make sure that we have as little groundwater, stormwater getting into our sanitary system. And that's pretty much it. We have a sanitary sewer master plan. Again, we did a lot of work on the sewer system overall the last couple of years. Now we're going to sort of pull it all together in a master plan, and then from that will come up that asset master plan that will end up with council. That concludes my section of the budget. Happy to take any last questions. Okay, I will hand this back over to Mr. Andre.
Council, questions?
Yeah, just on the sewer fund, the last slide before this, it's further and further into deficit. Is that going to be? Is that a trend we should be worried about? The fund balance at the bottom.
Yeah, I think that balance is less concerning to me than the water one at this point.
Yeah.
So this is
Sorry, I could jump in if you'd like.
Yes.
Is that
Hello.
going to be made up in fee increases at some
So
point?
when we look at the fund balances for the water and sewer funds, when we see a negative number, it actually is showing a surplus in the fund. So for the, if we look at, was it the sewer?
yeah, the sewer is going,
Yeah,
sewer's going up.
so when we're looking at this table, we're showing that in 2025, the fund is not balanced yet because it's in a deficit. So we need to continue balancing that fund, either some of the similar ways that Mr. Andre mentioned earlier, but we obviously don't use taxation. For future years, 2026, we'd be looking at continuing to balance it because the amount of surplus is the amount of contingency that we want to end up with in the adopted plan. So in future years, 2029, we'll be looking at reducing that to have a similar level of contingency throughout the 5 years of the plan.
Thanks.
And with the sewer one, like this is our first year, we haven't had a full year to run through yet, and so I can expect that this, the fund balance is going to change over the next couple of years as we understand what it really takes to run the plan. And as I said, water is not balanced yet, but that's part of the work that we're going to do from now until March 13th is to try to figure that out. And this is with the new 4%. This is the January 1st 4% increases.
The rates or the revenue that we see for the water and sewer funds currently include the annual 4% increase, but they haven't been adjusted based on 2024 actual consumption. So that's part of the work that will be done over the next month or so, and then updating the rates for future years from there.
Super.
Not worried yet.
There'll be time to worry.
All right.
Member Council. Only 2 slides left here. A quick note on the next steps regarding the financial plan for 2025, 2029. Aside from the public consultation mentioned earlier, that will happen at this location on February 6th, 4 to 6 p.m. We have scheduled the next special budget meeting where we will look at the third draft of the financial plan, and that will happen on March 13, 2025. That concludes our presentation on the second draft of the financial plan, and we'll pause here for any questions or comments on the material, or if there are any other documents from the attachments that would like to be discussed.
We have a hand up, Councillor Steer.
Yeah, thank you. And through the chair, thank you for the presentation today. I had some very specific questions around the financial plan, a couple of line items that I just needed clarification on. And I'll start with, it's in column number 314. It's around parking administration expenses. There was a line item there, and under that category of parking transaction expenses at $49,829. And I was just curious as to what parking transaction expenses were. I didn't know what those were.
Thank you for the question, Councillor Steer, through the chair. Can we have the screen?
The PowerPoint or this,
The PowerPoint.
the PowerPoint?
Yeah.
There's no slides.
Through the chair, there is no parking slide, so I guess, are we looking at line by line?
Maybe I have a comment, Councillor Steer, because I had a couple of specific questions as well, and I'm wondering if this would be suitable for maybe emails to staff to get all those little sort of questions answered before the next iteration. Is that something we can do, or do you want to talk about it now? Do you want to answer it now?
Thanks for the question through the chair. I'm happy either way. If council's comfortable, I know we have the whole day here. I can dig down into this. We didn't present parking today because we're not ready to. We just received on Friday the last the December numbers, and so I haven't taken those and put those into the budget. It's looking great, but I can either we can take this by email happily, or if you give us the time, we can dig down to it right now.
You know what? I'm gonna give it to Councillor Steer to see which way he would like his question answered. Or question.
Yeah, I'm comfortable reaching out directly to our CFO. There is one maybe that I wouldn't mind. Like a lot of them are very specific, but there was just one. And I guess I could ask them all directly to Mr. Andre there. So yeah, I'll do that. I'll do that directly, just sake of brevity.
I'm sure. And maybe what we can do also is if council, I have some questions as well. Maybe what we'll do is just do it as CC everybody so we all get the answers back. That would be fantastic. Is that suitable for council and staff? I know we have the whole day, but maybe some of these things might get a better answer, more full answer if we give staff some time. And then if that works for everybody, I'm okay with that. Okay. Councillor Steer, are you okay with that? Okay, let's do that. Where, Councillor Anderson?
Another question is, I'm not sure who it's for through the chair. And maybe it's something that I'll hear back later on, but as we go through the budget process, I often am asking people about the budget and talking about things that are in it. And sometimes new projects or thoughts come forward that are in our financial plan might not be related to strategic plan. Might be new projects or upgrades to old projects, whatever. How do we introduce new ideas into the financial plan as we're going through it, or is that something that really should be put off till the next budget iteration in that whole project process? So even at this point, even though we're kind of early, kind of midstream or something on the budget process, you start hearing things from members of the public and I won't be specific about it, about ideas that where they'd like to see spending, and it's hard to bring stuff forward at this time. So it's a question I'm just putting out there. Maybe don't have an answer today, but I'd like to know how to introduce the things and when to introduce them.
Let's reframe it for staff and see if staff present can give us an idea and answer. I know our CAO isn't here right now, but say a really great, cool project comes up mid financial planning process. It comes out of the blue. But let's just say that it does sort of align with our strategic plan and give us a little bit, and it's something that staff and council jump on board. How does that get introduced, and can it get introduced? We'll go for the top, and then we'll say, what if there's something that, isn't strategic plan? Councillor Anderson said, how does that get dealt with? That's a good question. So 2 questions.
Thank you for the question through the chair. I mean, I'll answer the first part as best as I can, knowing that it's not my usual role. I'm never been CFO, and then I'll pass it over to the financial team. They can help understand, like, in terms of timing and process. But on a general level, like, if council wants to make decisions on these types of things that add a project, I think it would be by resolution of council. So just notice a motion, have your conversations with staff, then it comes forward as a resolution. I think is the way that would happen. And then there's going to be depending on when it comes into us at what point. Like, we're now, I would say 3/4 of the way through, or at least half the way through this process, have balanced the budget. Then we have to bring that in and do all that work. And so, do we have staffing resources to do that? There will be a shut off time at some point. And then again, I'm speaking a bit out of my area of expertise, but we always have the option to adjust budgets, I think, like halfway through the year to, so something came on, we could talk about it then. So there's never not an opportunity, but I think it would be council resolution. Maybe I'd ask Ms. Morehouse or Mr. Andre have any further.
Sure, through the chair, I will add, one of the greatest tool for that is the public engagement. And it was a slide where we do engage with the community through Tofino, or even emailing us at budget@tofino.ca. We're welcome any feedback, any suggestions, and based on that, we can take those, half-baked ideas and put some our knowledge attached to it and bring it forward in front of council as suggestions. So I would say that is a great tool. And again, we'll take this opportunity to encourage the community and Tofinians to join us and come at the theater on February 6th. It's a great opportunity to talk with us and see what we have on the docket for 2025, and we are welcoming any feedback, suggestions, and if there is something that can be put together as a project or an idea, we will absolutely bring it forward to the council as a suggestion coming from the public.
Okay. Thanks for that. Looking to council, any more comments? Questions? No? Okay then, well then we're moving on to question period. Ms. Pelchat?
Thank you, Mayor Law. I will now make an open call for questions. For those in the gallery who wish to speak, please raise your hand. If there is anyone attending online via Zoom that would like to ask a question, you can do so now using the Q&A function. Before asking a question, you will need to state your name, your address, and the agenda item you are speaking to. I will now do a calling once, calling twice, calling 3 times. No questions, Mayor Law.
Okay, well then, the council president would like to move us into close.
I move that the meeting be closed to the public pursuant to sections 91A, C and I of the Community Charter to discuss matters relating to personal information about an individual who holds or is being considered for a position as an officer, employee or agent, employee relations, discussions with municipal